All righty, welcome back from the episode of Two Plane Sports. Today is Friday, March 24th, the day before the big recruiting weekend, March 25th, that a bunch of kids have been announcing over the course of about a month now. So obviously this video, we're going to be talking about a lot of the visitors. Now, there's rumors of 50, 60, 70, 80 kids coming, 90 kids. I really don't know how many truly will show up. All I know is it's going to be a ton and a ton of 4 and 5 stars that we should all be really excited for. So we're going to be talking about those group of kids, at least a handful of 4 and 5 stars. And then we're going to be talking about a few top 8 or one top 8 and one top 10 that Oklahoma made on Thursday, which is always a good thing with a couple kids in the 24 class. So let's just jump right into the top 8 with Max Anderson. Max Anderson, that might sound familiar as far as his last name goes. Little brother of Nate Anderson from Frisco, Texas, 6'5", 300-pound offensive tackle. He's a 2024 4-star. He's the number 13 offensive tackle in the class, according to 247. He put out a top 8 today that included Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Michigan, Arkansas, Ohio State, and Oregon. So he's got us in his top 8. Obviously, we've got a family connection and a family tie. That's always a good thing. He currently sits with one crystal ball in favor of Michigan at a confidence level of 5. I don't put a whole lot into that. Seems like he's got an official visit scheduled on June 23rd to Tennessee. So it seems like Tennessee could be a factor in here. I am curious to see what you think. I mean, 8, we always talk about 6, 5 or 6 seems to be where, in our opinion, it becomes serious because you only get 5 official visits. So naturally, if you release the top 5, then in theory, every school will receive an official visit. Top 8's kind of on that edge. I think naturally you would imagine that Oklahoma will get an official considering his brother is there.
Yes, that's exactly where my mind was at. It really, I think, comes down to Coach B. Nate's coach. There's a connection there. I'm sure that Max has been up there multiple times and hung out with the coaches. He knows what it's like to be in the palace. Again, I'm sure him and his family have been there to support Nate in an actual game, so they know how rowdy it can get at home. So he has a little bit more of an understanding, right? So maybe him going to OU to do his own visits as frequently isn't a huge concern, similar to like Eli Bowen, um, David Stone, guys that already know what OU is all about. One thing we should look out for is how are other schools going to come in and try to, poach him, I guess, in a way, from our perspective, and get him away from Oklahoma. I think Michigan probably does have the best shot. I know you mentioned the crystal balls at 5, only out of 5, which isn't, huge. If you look at David Stone's crystal balls to Michigan State from January, they're at like a 4 and 5. So they were really kind of just to get some hype around the idea of getting the player. I don't really take them more serious until they're around 6 or 7 on the confidence scale by the insider, to be completely honest about that. But if Oklahoma does not get an official from Max, that ideally it means that Oklahoma just targeted someone that they perceive as a better fit and a better player for the offense and just an overall better talent. Max himself is a good player, good football player, knows how to play. Usually younger brothers, if you kind of look at the record of just siblings in sports, younger brothers are usually better. No disrespect to Nate, but Max has that kind of potential as well. We'll see what happens, but you would like to imagine that he comes at maybe to the spring game at least. I think that would be a good step in getting Oklahoma further along and getting past just the top 8, because we are targeting a lot of offensive linemen and we're starting to get in really good position with others, which might take a spot away if Max isn't that interested or that invested in playing at Oklahoma like his brother.
And he just took a visit. I believe it would be over spring break. He went up to Michigan for the first time They made a visit, and it seemed like it went really well, exceeded his expectations. And there's a quote with a 247 reporter saying that it exceeded his expectations, and he said that he will be setting up an official with them. And actually, I mentioned the Tennessee official. He's got one scheduled for Michigan now, June 16th through 18th. So naturally, you think, okay, Tennessee, as we talked about, top 5 because you get 5 officials. Tennessee gets an official, Michigan gets an official. So if he's coming in this weekend to visit Oklahoma, you would like to think, since he just visited Michigan, he set up an official with Michigan after the fact. You would think that naturally, if he's going to set up an official, or maybe before he leaves, he sets up an official, or sometime quickly after. If you don't see him set up an official after the visit, that might be a sign that it might be Oklahoma might not be a for sure top 5. And maybe it just comes down to the fact that he wants to be his own person and do his own thing and not follow his brother. And then there are some brothers that want to play together. I mean, it just depends on, the dynamic and their personalities. And I'm not saying that that's the way it is, but there is a scenario where he's just going there because, let's see, my brother's here or whatever. And maybe he just decides that he wants to do his own thing. But if you see him set up an official after this weekend, you'd like to think that Oklahoma then at that point is definitely firmly in his top 5.
Agreed. And I want to go back to the family thing that I mentioned, and maybe Oklahoma isn't that interested. Think about it more, and I'm sure someone's already caught me in the chat as you're watching. It would be surprising if Oklahoma backs off of this recruitment because of their focus of making this a family-oriented team. I mean, you got Peyton Bowen. People just assume Eli is coming, and Oklahoma's recruiting him. If we get Michael Hawkins, you kind of just assume Malik Hawkins is going to be a guy that comes in. That's the trend that they're trying to set as a staff. If we want to make sure that the family is part of the OU family, not just one kid. So it would be very surprising. And I think at that point, it would be Max saying, I'm going to be my own person. If he, like you mentioned, doesn't come out of the next visit with an official, at least planned to happen in the summer.
Definitely. So it's something we're going to have to watch, but it's always good to be put in a top 8. You can never complain about that. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll see how legitimate his interest is after this weekend and how this visit goes. So staying on that offensive line, Oklahoma made the top 10 for Andrew Sprague, 6'6", 290-pound offensive tackle out of Kansas City, Missouri. He is a 2024 4-star, and he's the number 9 offensive tackle, the number 160 overall player in the class. He released the top 10 at USC, Oklahoma, Michigan, Notre Dame, LSU, Stanford, Oregon, Missouri, Penn State, and Nebraska. So obviously 10 schools rather than 8. Oklahoma is, I believe, firmly in this. They have started to really establish some Kansas City recruiting ties here. I think you'll see some progress. I think him being putting Oklahoma in the top 10 is legitimate. But, this is also, it seems like Oklahoma's in for a lot of offensive linemen. And a lot of offensive linemen are interested in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's interested in a lot of offensive linemen. I think this class for offensive line, between even talking about Andrew Sprague and Max Anderson, you're not going to land everyone. But it seems like that the offensive line recruiting is trending up right now. And I think Oklahoma's firmly in his top 10. I would even argue towards the top half of this. So I don't know. What do you think?
I would agree. Oklahoma's definitely going. I think they're aiming higher and getting at least into the conversation with those bigger, I guess, perceived as more talented recruits. And I don't think either of us mean that in any disrespect to the guys that aren't these highly rated players, because they can always work their ass off and be a starter and be very good football players and get to the NFL, if they're fortunate enough. But looking at what Oklahoma's going after this year, especially with the offensive linemen, we are going after significantly more 4-stars than at least it seems like it, than we were last year, and we are actually in the conversation for them. What ends up happening could always obviously is out of Oklahoma's control. They can only do so much to make sure they can get a commitment. But it wouldn't surprise me if we take another four or five guys at the offensive lineman. I think that can be a trend moving forward because of the transfer portal is probably going to be a big factor and playing time / injuries. Offensive linemen take hits every single play and they're going to get rolled up on more than likely. They get dinged up a lot more often than most other positions. I think it's fair to just assume Oklahoma's going to get 3 to 5 guys every cycle for the offensive line position just to make sure they have enough talent and depth in case a starting tackle goes out, like we're experiencing this season. I mean, we're not to the season yet, right? But Big Sexy and Walter Rouse are currently recovering from injuries. That's taking him out of spring ball, puts him a step back, but gives these other guys that would be the perceived backups if these guys were healthy to prove themselves, to work harder, to push once these more experienced guys and the guys that are expected to be starters once fall comes, to push them in summer workout. So I think it's Oklahoma just trying to change the overall culture of what it's been over the last, pre-Venables to make sure that there's a little bit more competition and making sure that in case of a worst case scenario, when you lose a player, either for a week or the season, you've got someone that you can confidently put in there and not be worried about, can they hold up? Are they going to be just as mean as my starting left tackle? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and he put out a few quotes with Hayes Fawcett from On3 of his, basically explaining why each school's in his top 10. And a few that I'd like to highlight, he with Notre Dame, he basically said that it's a dream school of his. So Notre Dame's a legitimate. Anytime you hear dream school, doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to go there, but obviously he's got some serious interest there. Nebraska, talking about how the new coaching staff has him interested. But really, another big one is Missouri. He grew up a fan. Both of his parents went to Mizzou. He lives in the state of Missouri. So there's a connection there. But this is the quote that he said about Oklahoma. Oklahoma's in my top 10 because of how they developed their line. Big name guys like Trent Williams, Creed Humphrey, and Orlando Brown all went to OU. And I believe Coach Bedenbaugh can develop me to be one of the next greats. So that's high praise. And, looking through, and this is a free article that anyone can get into if people would like to go, actually read every quote, but looking at it, really that's one of the better compliments as far as production and what a school has put on the field. He did put out that Michigan, they won the Joe Moore Award 2 years in a row. So that's the only other one that's really talking about production there. All the other ones are, because I like the style of offense, environment was crazy at LSU, Stanford is academic. So I think Oklahoma's firmly in his top 5 based on these quotes. He's going to be hitting up Nebraska this weekend, so he's not coming to Oklahoma this weekend. Obviously, you would naturally love to see him come to this recruiting weekend, but this is more of a 2025 recruiting weekend than 24, so it makes sense what's going to happen there. And so I just thought I'd throw that in there. According to 247 or On3, he's actually 6'8", 275 pounds, rather than 6'6", according to 247. 6'8", 275 is quite a frame for a kid who's a junior about to be a senior.
Mm-hmm. And those 2 inches, they matter, especially with his reach. Just because he's gotten taller, but that means his arms also got that much longer to keep the guys off of him.
Definitely. So that's who Oklahoma's made a top 8 and a top 10 for. Both are great offensive linemen, both guys that we would love to have in this 2024 class. Talented, but I see Oklahoma competing for both. Whether Oklahoma lands one or both, I guess we'll see. But definitely going to be watching Max Anderson this weekend as far as does he set up an official quickly sometime next week. So now we're going to be talking about a few of the upcoming visitors that are 4 and 5 stars in the 24 and 25 classes that we really haven't talked about on the show. But before we get into it, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And follow us on Spotify and Apple And then also leave us a review on there. That helps us out a lot. And be sure, whenever you're already subscribed, be sure to like the video and comment on the video. It helps us a lot, and it spreads our video to and on the recommendation page. So let's start with just kind of an overall look. There's going to be a lot of California kids that are going to be visiting this weekend. We always talk about those Cali Sooners, and people were concerned that Brent Venables is not putting up as much of an emphasis on California as maybe some people think he should. They are recruiting the state of California hard. So let's start with Jordan Lockhart, 2024 four-star linebacker, 6'3", 230 pounds, out of St. John Bosco, one of the premier high schools in high school football, from Bellflower, California. He's coming in for a visit this weekend. Extremely athletic. And, he recently visited this week USC. So naturally, of course, it's not overly surprising. But he's going to be traveling across the country. What's your thought on Jordan Lockhart? I'm not overly sure where Oklahoma necessarily stands here. Just because from my understanding, this is his first visit, and you might correct me if I'm wrong. I'm kind of curious. What do you think?
I think he could be a very good player, but it depends on the kind of football he would want to play, right? I think what Grinch and the USC defense would ask of him might be more appealing to him, because if you watch his tape, he plays a lot of edge, but he can drop back in coverage. So you would, just thinking of his frame, how he plays at the high school level, you just, to me, naturally slot him in at potentially competing for a cheetah position. There's a lot of competition for that spot right now, currently on the roster, let alone what is being recruited for the 2024 class. So kind of style he wants to play, right? Does being close to home matter? Does he want to stay in California? I think you see a lot of kids now are at least entertaining the idea of staying at or closer to home, with UCLA, starting to get improved under Chip Kelly. USC with Lincoln Riley has been getting, still gets a lot of hype no matter what. So kids are going to be maybe slightly more inclined to stay closer to home when they're coming from Cali. I still think Oklahoma could be in a good spot. It would just depend on how many people are getting recruited. Does he feel at home? I think you still see a lot of kids from California say that Oklahoma feels like home for them. That not everyone wants to live in a huge, super fast city. Some people just want to take it a little bit more slow. I mean, everyone is different, right? So I think the biggest thing for him this weekend is how well does he connect with Coach Roof? Does Chavis kind of get a little involved? Because again, he is at the high school level, he plays at the line a lot. So does he get recruited as an edge, and maybe they try to pack on the pounds if he does go to Oklahoma? We'll see. But it's going to be interesting, especially like you mentioned, there's quite a bit of talent there. So at what point is there a cutoff where these are the guys we want to focus on? And does Lockhart kind of get into that conversation? I think he should, because again, I do think he could be a very good player. But how does OU see him? How does he see OU in the playing style he wants to play at the college level?
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. Does he want to stay closer to home? So he originally committed to Ole Miss on January 16th of 2022 and decommitted recently on March 5th of 2023. So he was committed to Ole Miss for like 14 months. He visited Alabama at least once, or actually twice, excuse me. During that time, I'm sure he's been taking a few visits elsewhere. And recently, since he's decommitted, he picked up an offer from OU, Michigan, Texas A&M. I think also a Tennessee offer came in shortly before his decommitment from Ole Miss. So he's opening up his recruitment. Schools are offering. Seems like if you're willing to commit to Ole Miss, distance must not be a factor. Anytime you can get a kid from California that can travel to your school, like Oklahoma, halfway across the country on their own dime, that's a good sign. At least he's legitimate as far as his interest goes. But it'll be interesting to see after the visit. It's always follow the visits, but you can always have a one, a first visit, and then the guy never comes back just because he didn't really care for OU, or OU didn't care about him or care for him, or maybe it's a mutual decision that maybe you're just not the best fit here. So there's a lot of one-off visits. So it'll be interesting to see after the fact, talking about where Oklahoma truly stands for him. But I would imagine distance doesn't play a huge factor for him. So staying on the defensive side, 2025 5-star cornerback Devin Sanchez, 6'2", 170-pound kid out of Houston, Texas. He plays for North Shore High School. He is the #1 corner in the 2025 class, and I get it. He just finished his sophomore year. These ratings are really early and very little tape as far as how much, how you can grade these kids. At the end of the day, even if you're number, 10 at any point in any of this class in your overall position, that's pretty solid. I mean, being #1 this early is really telling. Oklahoma will be hosting him for a visit this weekend. He came up on his Twitter on March 20th and announced it. So it's been somewhat recent of his visit coming up here. I believe this is his first visit to Oklahoma. I am not 100% sure. I believe it is, though. 36 tackles, 18 pass breakups, and 4 interceptions as a sophomore playing in Texas high school football. What do you think?
Big fan of this kid. He is very talented for how young he is. And if he keeps progressing at the same rate, he probably will not be letting go of that #1 corner spot in his class. He has the speed to make sure he doesn't get beat over top, and he has very good discipline. He turns his head around, gets his hand on the ball. I believe he had a decent amount of picks last year in his sophomore year, so probably going to be thrown to less going into next season. So his stats might not pop off the page like they did this year, but he's going to be good. And being 6'3" at 16 years old, he could grow a little bit more. He's definitely going to beef up. So he is pretty skinny now, but he's going to get bigger and stronger as he hits the weights over the off seasons. And then definitely once he gets to college, you probably expect him to be maybe 180, 185, maybe even start getting close to 200. As long as he can maintain his speed and that agility he has, dude's going to be good wherever he goes. And the fact that Oklahoma's in on him so early is a good sign. Shows Jay Valai, again, doing what he does, an excellent recruiter. I think you can put him up against almost anyone in cornerback recruiting, and he is going to be up there on that list. I kind of what you said about Lockhart. How does he see the visit after it's done? Post visit, what are his thoughts on Oklahoma? I think, given Valai's track record, I would like to think Oklahoma's going to stick around at least for a while. He is a 2025 kid, so it's not like it's a pressing matter. He's not the 2025 kids haven't committed and dropped, top 8s or 10s or 12s, whatever they've done. But you've got some time here to make up any ground if Oklahoma does feel like they're behind. And you've got one of the best recruiters in the country. And more than likely, Brandon Hall will be helping out because it seems like those two tag team the DB recruiting quite a bit because they can shift them around once they get to Oklahoma, depending on where they see him.
And would you believe me if I told you that Oklahoma offered before Georgia? We always talk about how fast Georgia offers. Oklahoma beat them by a couple months. OU offered in July of last year, and Georgia offered in September. Alabama beat us by about a month and offered in June. I mean, he's already camped at Alabama. You naturally think that a kid as a 5-star #1 corner, Alabama's involved. Alabama's going to be in there. LSU's throwing an offer in. You naturally think LSU, Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma. But again, it's like anything. What happens after the visit? So I totally agree with you.
Something real quick for both Lockhart and Sanchez, all the schools you just mentioned and the offers that you mentioned were before we wrapped up with Lockhart. all SEC schools. Lockhart was committed to an SEC school. Obviously, Oklahoma has a huge brand, but now that we're going into the SEC, that's going to put us in significantly better spots for some of these big time defensive players. I think Oklahoma really is going to do well regardless of conference for offensive players. But these defensive guys clearly want to play in the SEC. For the most part, the most talented defensive players want to play in the SEC. So naturally, if as long as Oklahoma continues to improve and Venables and Bates and the rest of the staff can show progress, Oklahoma will naturally just start getting these guys' attention more than they already are and start to land them more frequently than we have in the last decade.
Yeah, you can already tell that there's a difference between us going to the SEC next year and Brent Venables and the defensive minded coaching staff being here. The amount of kids, the sheer visits that we're getting from top 100, top 50 players on the defensive side of the ball has exponentially grown. It used to be, one here, one there every so often. Now this weekend there's going to be a ton. And then, Oklahoma's also getting visits from, the number 1 defensive lineman, the number 3 defensive lineman, the number 9 defensive. Like three or four top 10 defensive linemen are seriously interested in Oklahoma and very well might all of them end up as Sooners. That's unheard of, at least for Oklahoma's sake, in a long, long time. So it's good stuff. And talking about another area that I think Oklahoma and the staff has started to prioritize, because this is SEC country as well, just east of us in Little Rock, Arkansas. Omarion Robinson, 6 foot, 171-pound safety. As I said, he's from Little Rock. He's in 2025 4-star. He's number 57 overall and the number 4 safety in the class, number 1 player in the state of Arkansas. So a top 5 safety in the 25 class. He's going to be coming in for a visit to Oklahoma. According to 247, Oklahoma has not offered him. So I'd imagine he's coming in for a visit. He's coming from Little Rock, so it's not too terribly of a long drive, but it's a decent commute to come in and visit Oklahoma this weekend. I'd imagine he's looking for an offer this weekend, and I would imagine he will earn that offer. I would be kind of shocked that a kid like him would not receive an offer if he made the trip himself. What do you think? Obviously Brandon Hall is putting in some work here.
Yeah, I'm confident that Brandon Hall can do his job. And if Omarion is the kind of guy that they see fits this defense, he will 100% get an offer. That's without a question. He's talented. He has speed to cover sideline to sideline. I would say that's pretty important with safety, just as much as it is a linebacker, especially when you have when you are going up against some of these bigger receivers, guys that are maybe a little bit more physical. I think our corners will naturally start getting better at covering them. But when you have a safety that is also a threat, if we're ever going up against a star wide receiver, a big time guy, you've got a safety there that can help out whoever the corner is at that time. We'll see what happens. I think it's too early to tell with Omarion how much there's legitimate traction one way or the other, because like you mentioned, it doesn't seem like he has an Oklahoma offer quite yet. If he walks away with one, that means both Omarion and Brandon Hall, along with the staff, think that there might be a future in this. We'll see. Given that it's a lot of 2025, our boy Sperry is going to be big time this weekend. I believe he's going to be there. I think he was there as of today with an unofficial. If he's there this weekend, he's probably going to be one of the more important players there, because he gets to lead the recruitment of the rest of his class. And even though we are 2 years away basically from them signing anything meaningful that says they're going to be a Sooner, it's his time to step up and show that he isn't just a leader because he committed first, but because he is the quarterback and can get these guys to start showing more interest in being Oklahoma Sooners with him.
Oh, for sure. He's crucial to be able to start recruiting these kids. And you look at his offer list right now. He's got Arkansas, Ole Miss, Texas, TCU, USC, Auburn, Baylor, Florida State. None of these offers that he currently has aren't like insurmountable. Like Oklahoma can't, like they're not late to the game. You offer a kid early and maybe beat a Georgia, beat an Alabama, beat an Ohio State. You get in with this kid early. could be the difference down the road. I'm not saying that's make or break. Sometimes it does come down to the timing of these offers and the length of relationships and how that's been going. So I certainly hope Oklahoma offers. And then if Oklahoma does offer, hopefully they push them. But again, I mean, it's kind of a theme that we're talking is just because a lot of these 25 kids we've never talked about. We don't really have a general read on where they're thinking or where they could go. And that's how important this weekend is for both the players and the university to figure out who's legitimate, who are we going after. We've got a year and a half before these kids even sign, but we got to know who we're going after now to put all our effort and time into. The last guy we're going to be talking about a little bit of offense. Dalen McCutchen, he's a 2025 four-star receiver according to Rivals. He's the number 96 overall player in his class. He's a wide receiver out of Lovejoy, which Lovejoy, if I'm not mistaken, is where Peyton Pierce is from the same area. So Oklahoma is definitely building a little bit of a pipeline there as far as, granted, they haven't gotten Peyton Pierce's commitment, not that they are tomorrow or anything or anytime soon, but obviously Oklahoma's in a good spot for Peyton Pierce. Again, Oklahoma hosting, and Oklahoma has offered Dalen McCutchen. Emmett Jones has identified him as a guy that he could see being a part of this class. Talented kid, competes in track and field. What do you think?
Speed. He is fast, and he's going to get faster. I mean, as a sophomore, it looks like he ran a 12.2 100, which is relatively fast, especially if that he can apply that on the football field. He's burning kids regularly, and watching his tape, that's exactly what you see. You see him getting pretty open deep down the field, and it's not just speed, not just downhill speed. He's got agility too, so he's breaking tackles. Bigger wide receiver, standing at 6 feet tall already. I mean, again, I like that Oklahoma's offered him. You mentioned it, Peyton Pierce, a teammate of his. So we're getting into these high schools, starting to build relationships, getting more of these guys that are nearby Oklahoma. With the wide receiver recruiting under Emmett Jones, to me, still seems a little early to get a read, because he's a new coach. We don't know exactly, what he's going after. It seems like he's going after, for the most part, a lot more bigger receivers than we've had over the last few years. So I think we're going to see a lot more length, right, on playing wide receiver. But how much is he going to press for wide receiver commits? And we know that DeMarco Murray, if we kind of just compare both of those guys, DeMarco Murray has probably fewer spots that he can fill, because of running, there's more limitations with how many players you can play at the running back position. But we know he puts Oklahoma in a good position that it's a race for those spots. Can Emmett Jones do the same thing for the wide receiver spot like we have had in the past? I think that regardless of your feelings on Lincoln Riley, that's one thing that he did well for Oklahoma, is he made wide receivers commit fast, because those were coveted spots to play wide receiver to Oklahoma under his offense. I think Lebby can do the same with his offense. Now Emmett Jones just needs to help implement that so that it is a race to get to however many spots there are per cycle.
And, looking at his offer list, I said that he has an Oklahoma offer, and according to 247, he was offered July 27th of last year. Now, the one thing I do wonder is, while he does have an offer, but that was offered before Emmett Jones took the helm. I wonder if he comes up this weekend and then this is kind of a re-offer one way or another. I'm just saying, hey, that's a legitimate offer. That's a committable offer. Thanks for coming up. We needed to kind of, introduce and really get to know you a little bit, but that is a re-offer and that is a committable offer. I don't know if maybe they've already had that conversation, but it could be. I don't know. That's just kind of something that I'm curious of. And, July 27th, Oklahoma didn't offer a ton of 2025 wide receivers without their permanent wide receiver coach. So it is kind of interesting that they would have offered that without a full-time committed guy to the position. I do think that means that Oklahoma's interest is probably extremely high if they're willing to do that. And they did not care who the wide receiver coach was. They think this guy is the guy.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point there. You didn't see Jaden Nickens get an offer until recently, and he's a 5-star 2025 wide receiver in the state of Oklahoma. So Dalen more than likely getting pursued by Jeff Levy and making sure that Jeff must see something in him to want to keep that offer around. They could have easily just taken it off the table. And I mean, every kid takes that kind of situation differently, but clearly it doesn't seem like that was the case. And he's at least still open to the idea of playing in Crimson and Cream.
Definitely. So, do you have any final thoughts, or do you want to roll into the individual challenge?
No final thoughts. Individual challenge. Do you think that Oklahoma can walk out of this weekend with a potential of getting 3 to 5 5-star 2025 guys? It seems like it is trending in that direction. It feels like a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, we were talking about 2024 guys and Nigel Smith and Brown Schuler, T.A. Cunningham, Colin Simmons. Seems like it was a year ago that this was the same situation we were in, where Oklahoma was laying the groundwork for getting these 5-star guys. Now that's stuff has shifted a little bit in the recruiting world, where all those guys aren't the priority, it seemingly, but Oklahoma's laying groundwork for 2025 right now, and it's going to pay off, in my opinion.
Oh, it will. And this is a telling weekend as far as who's going to be a part of this 25 class and who Oklahoma sees as a potential fit. So if you made it this far, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And be sure to leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. And we will catch you guys next week for a recap of this big recruiting weekend.